Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I'm here to share with you another wonderful deck by Claire Goodchild. This one is super unique. It is the Memento Mori, Lenormand, and Oracle deck, so it is actually two decks in one. I have been so excited waiting for the arrival of this deck. The Memento Mori is like a really unique deck created by Claire Goodchild. If you've watched my channel before, you know that I'm a huge fan of Claire Goodchild's artwork. I have most of her decks. Some of them I have multiple copies of. So she's the creator of the Antique Anatomy Tarot as well. And I have multiple editions of that deck. She also has the wonderful Oracle of Oddities decks. I think there's 3 of them at this point. And she just creates these amazing decks that have this gorgeous kind of earthy but slightly gothic artwork to them, and I just love her artwork. I love her decks. There's so much depth within them, and when we take a look here, that the artwork is fairly minimalistic in style, but there's just a lot of depth and meaning in each of these cards. So we're going to take a look at the deck, but first I want to talk a little bit about this really unique deck. So this is an 85 card Oracle deck, and it's really 2 decks in one because the first 36 cards tie into Lenormand reading, so you can use the first 36 cards as a Lenormand deck, which is just awesome, and the rest of the deck, or put the whole thing together, and it works as an oracle as well. So I've been really excited to get this one because that's super unique. I love the fact that it's kind of like 2 decks in one. I can pull out those Lenormand cards into a Lenormand reading, or I can put them all together and use it as an oracle, separate it out, use it as oracle that way as well. So this has been one that I've been super excited to take a look at. We'll take a look at the kind of box and guidebook here in a minute, but first I want to dive into these gorgeous cards. So first of all, can we just take a minute to appreciate the backs of these cards, because these cards are super awesome. I love the skulls. I love that it has that distressed texture to it that we see in a lot of Claire's decks, particularly her indie ones, of course. And I love that she always adds that layer to it because it just really makes it feel really kind of atmospheric, right? I just absolutely love that about it. So now let's take a look at each of the cards. So here we have our card number 1, which is Horseshoe. And for the Lenormand associations, it would be the Rider. So you can see where it could be used as a horseshoe in terms of an oracle, or as a Lenormand card in place of the Rider. So here we have the Clover, again, works as an oracle, but is also the second card in the Lenormand. Gorgeous with it coming out of the pelvis. I love that. Love that. So here we have the Wheel, and this takes the place of the ship. And I think that works quite well because it is like a pirate ship wheel. So here we have Grave, and in the Lenormand, this card actually relates to house. So it relates back to the sort of that family, home, and security. You could think of a grave as an eternal house. So that totally works in that sense. As an oracle card, of course, it has just its own level of meaning, which is wonderful. In the little guidebook, which we'll take a look at here at the end, she does have meanings for both the Lenormand Association and the Oracle Association, which is wonderful. So card 5 is the Gallows, which in the Lenormand serves for the tree. And I think we can definitely get that idea of tree from it. It's made of wood, it's wrapped around with the leaves. So I think it is important to point out that in Lenormand, as we say, a tree is a tree is a tree. It doesn't matter what imagery is on the card. When the tree card comes up in a Lenormand spread, it always means the tree. It doesn't really change based on what the imagery pulls out of you, so to speak, like it does in Oracle and Tarot. So it's important to note that there is that distinction with Lenormand. So here we have Smoke, which relates to the Lenormand card of Clouds. And she has for the Lenormand associations confusion, sadness, and resistance. And I think you can definitely see that represented in this image too on a oracle standpoint as well. So we have smoke and or clouds. Snake is also the same in the Lenormand. So the snake card does appear in both Oracle sense and Lenormand sense here. And I love this snake that it's all intertwined together. I think that's really interesting. So here we have the casket, which relates to the coffin card in the Lenormand. Gorgeous. So here we have the wreath, which relates to the bouquet in a Lenormand deck. So I love the kind of, this is more of a deck of the darker nature of things. And I think that's really interesting. The Memento Mori in Latin means remember you must die. And so this whole deck is an artistic and symbolic reminder of the inevitability of death. And I think that's really interesting because that's a topic that we tend to shy away from a lot. So moving along, we have card 10, which is the scythe, and in the Lenormand is also the scythe. And I love this idea of cutting things down, but we have the growth in the middle too as well. I think that's beautiful. So here we have the whip, which is the same in the Lenormand deck. And I love all the blooming botanicals in these cards. I think that it really adds a whole nother layer to each of the meanings, I think. So here we have bats in place of the bird card in the Lenormand, and I think that's really actually quite cool. I love the idea of bats being used to represent the energy of the bird card in the Lenormand, because I think that's just really cool. It fits really well with the theme of this deck. And I kind of like bats, so as my kiddo calls them, sky puppies, right? They're sky puppies. So here we have the child card, which is the same in the Lenormand. And I love that it's in this photo frame. I just think that's clever, really cute and clever. So here we have the fox, and of course, same title in the Lenormand, and we have the fox skull. We have the bear here, again, same title in the Lenormand, and again, using the skull of the animal, which I think is really cool. I mean, this is definitely a deck that, you gotta like skulls and things and anatomy stuff to kind of be into this deck, right? Kind of just has that imagery, has that vibe as well. So here we have the stars, and I think that this is really cool. Same name in the Lenormand, and I love that it's actually like the star map that the hand is holding. I think that's really cool. Again, in Lenormand, it doesn't really matter so much how it's pictured. I mean, you could just write the words on a card and still do readings with them. But I like when the imagery is really cool and interesting. I really like the idea of the raven in place of the stork. Again, it fits with the theme of the deck. But I also like that the stork tends to be a card of, like she has here in her keywords, change, grace, and fertility. And I like the idea of tying the raven into that. I would tend to think of stork a little bit more in terms of fertility, but I like the energy of the raven for change and grace. I think that's really cool. So here we have the dog, and again, same name in the Lenormand, and we have the dog skull on top of this big stone rock. Here we have the tower, again, same name in the Lenormand, and I love this image for the tower card. The tower card in the Lenormand is a bit different than the tower card in the tarot, and I think that this is a great depiction of it. She has here employment, business, government. It's kind of the backbone of society, right? And I think that's really interesting. So here we have the cemetery card to take the place of the garden card in the Lenormand. And I think this is just a fantastic card. Again, in terms of Lenormand, the imagery doesn't really matter so much, but I just think this imagery is awesome. I love little vacant and occupied signs. It's a cute card. So here we have what would be the mountain card. And I think this is a great one for tapping into that mountain energy, because it's really about kind of obstacles and delays, maybe things getting in your way. And I think it's like covered up, which is really, really interesting. The tip of it is covered up. So again, if we're looking at it from an oracle standpoint, to look at how that top of that is hidden, it's undercover. We don't really know what's underneath it. I love that you can look at these cards in terms of the Lenormand as well as the Oracle Association. So here we have the crossroads, which goes by the same name in the Lenormand. And I like this idea of the two hands pointing in different directions. We have the little flowers, one white, one black. I think that's gorgeous. Definite gives the sense of idea of choices and decisions. So here we have the rats in place of the mice. I think the use of rats over mice, although very similar, works really well with the theme of this deck, but still comes across with that same energy. I think is great. So here we have the heart, and again, same name in the Lenormand. Love the illustration of the anatomical heart. I think it's just beautiful. And of course it has all these beautiful flowers around it. I think the botanicals mixed in with all the skeletal aspects is really what appeals to me in this deck. It's like life and death coming together in a deck. I think it's beautiful. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about Claire's artwork in general, is that in general, it all feels like life and death coming together in this beautiful dance. So here we have the ring, and that is, of course, the same in the Lenormand. And I think this is a gorgeous depiction. Usually we see a ring like a wedding ring type of a ring. And I love this idea of the wreath ring, because the ring isn't always just about, you know, it's about contracts and commitments, but it's not always just about the relationship between two partners, right? It can be commitments to other things as well. And I think that that's depicted beautifully that way. So here we have the book, again, the same in the Lenormand. And I love this imagery. I love that it's got the pentacle on the front. There's often discussion about books, whether they are open and closed in the Lenormand cards. And this one, to me, have the closed book, really shows that those secrets are in there just waiting for you to reveal them, right? Waiting for you to take the time to read it and to learn what's inside. Gorgeous. So here we have the letter. Same name in the Lenormand, and this is again one of my favorite cards. I just really love the imagery of this. I love that it looks old and worn. It's got the coffee stain on it, or the cup stain on it. Beautiful. So here we have the man card, and again, similar to the child, it has like in the frame, which is wonderful. And we have the woman. Gorgeous illustrations. Here we have the lilies and the sun. I think this is a really interesting sun card, because this doesn't quite look like a sun. It looks more like, my biology knowledge is really limited. It's been a long time since I've been in school, but it looks more like a cell or something. And I think that's really interesting. Again, in the Lenormand, a sun is a sun is a sun. But if we're looking at it from an oracle perspective, I think that there's some interesting things that could be discovered in there. And here we have the moon, and I love this card. Beautiful moon. Definitely does look like the moon behind it. Here we have the key. I love the skeleton key. Gorgeous. It's another one of my favorites. So here we have the fish coming into the last few cards of the Lenormand, the anchor, and the cross. So that was the first 36 cards that create the Lenormand. So let's move on to the oracle cards that are included. So we have poison. We have salt. That's interesting. Cup. Perfume. Lantern. Hourglass. I quite like that one. The hourglass has wings. That's cool. So here we have broom. That could be used as an alternate Lenormand card too. Sometimes we see the broom in place of some of the other cards, which I think is really cool. Scale. Sign. Love that it's a funeral sign. So fitting with this deck. Spirit board. I love this card. I think it's amazing. Just fun to have a spirit board card in a deck. I don't know that I have another deck that has a spirit board card. So here we have, oh, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. Tasiography. I don't know. I'm going to have to look that up. I don't even know what that is. Cool card though. Chiromancy. Crystal ball. Love that there's a skull in there. Teapot. Crown. Candle. Ladder. Top It, that's another great card. Love that. Scissors. Scissors could also be used in place of a Lenormand. Sometimes we see those in place of the scythe, which is awesome. Satchel. Globe. Watch. Plague Doctor. That's another interesting one. That's pretty cool. Lock. Knife. Again, could be an alternate Lenormand card as well. Pot. Almost like a cauldron. Coins. It's very similar setup to the Antique Anatomy Tarot coin suit. It's kind of cool. Cure. Syringe. Mort Bell. Shovel. Charm. That's pretty cool. Embalming fluid. That one's very appropriate for the deck, right? Rope. Pedestal. Love that. Medical kit. Very like magician's tools there, getting all your tools together. Sextant. Viewing table. That's interesting. Again, really interesting cards in this deck. Glove. Pillar. Harp. Tear catcher. Amputation saw. Some kind of tools there. Door. I really like that one too. We can see the skeleton in the door. Cat. Again, alternative for the dog card. Moving things around. Urn. Offering. Oh, that's really cool. The shells and the feather. And finally, Memento Mori. That's awesome. So this is a really unique deck because we have our first 36 cards here that to make up the cards of the Lenormand. Some of them, I think I might have a bit of a time remembering what goes to what, but thankfully Claire has included a list in the guidebook so that if I were to have a question, I could always look there. But for the most part, I think they're pretty spot on, pretty self-explanatory, which is awesome. I like for my Lenormand decks to be really easy to just glance at the picture and know what it is. And for the most part, I can do that with these, so that is awesome. Love that. So we have our Lenormand deck, and then we also have our Oracle cards. And this deck has super unique Oracle cards that I don't think I have in any other Oracle decks. Like some interesting things like salt. Salt's used for purifying. That's a really interesting card to have. I think of some of the more interesting ones. Spirit board. I mean, that's awesome. So this one has like some really unique and interesting cards in it that I think would make for some really interesting readings. I'm really kind of curious to check out her interpretations. Let's take a look real quick at what she has in the guidebook, because I just want to see what the interpretations look like. So this came with a little white book, which has a little bit about the deck. So we have the first 36 cards here are, of course, the Lenormand cards, but she also has included just Oracle interpretations for them as well. And in the back here, there is the relation to the actual Lenormand. So I think that's really cool that they're both there. So I love that the Lenormand cards also have Oracle meanings. I think that's fantastic because it really allows you to use it as both. I could keep it separate as a Lenormand, or I could just mix it in and use it as an Oracle as well. Let's look here. I was going to pull up Poison. So her description is negative and pessimistic thoughts. Harm done to you, suspicious or dangerous activity. Answer is no. That's really interesting. So basically this would also function as a no card. I bet you she has a yes in here somewhere too. Here we go. Cure. The answer is yes. How awesome is that? So if you wanted to do a yes and no, you could also use the poison and the cure cards for a yes or no reading. That is just so cool. Claire's put so much thought into this deck. There's so many different ways that you could use it. I think that's really awesome. I just want to see here if she has anything at the back. So she has also a blessing and a spread that spells out Mori. So your recent past, the present, your near future, and advice from spirit. That's an awesome little spread. So I'm super excited about this deck. I love how versatile it is. I love that it is a Lenormand and an Oracle in one. I can't wait to use it as both, basically. I think I'm going to keep them separate for a little while and use the Oracle cards as just like an Oracle. Might even mix it with my Oracle of Oddities maybe. Or maybe just use it on its own, but I definitely want to do some Lenormand readings with this deck as well. I do want to mention that it comes in this cute little tackle box, which, you know, Claire's boxes are always cute little details on them. The other thing I also wanted to point out, I'm like, oh, and this. I get really excited when I have Claire's decks on my table. I don't know why that is. I just always do. The other thing that I wanted to mention about this particular deck is that Claire has a Memento Mori podcast on her website at Black in the Moon. And she's going through each of the cards, and it's really awesome. I definitely recommend checking that out because she shares information there as well, and that's just fantastic. Let's go ahead. I don't really want to shuffle the Lenormand cards in. So here's the Lenormand. Let's just go ahead and shuffle the Oracle just so that we can see. I mean, I'm sure it shuffles beautifully like all of Claire's decks. I really like the cardstock that she uses. It shuffles beautifully, it holds up well, and it's just, yeah, real easy to use. So we got the cat, the shovel, and the candle. I love the way that these look on the table. I'm really excited to incorporate these into readings with my other decks as well. My Oracle of Oddities is one that I really like to pair up. But I also really enjoy working with them with Claire's other decks as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and give the Lenormand a little shuffle. I have a feeling I'm going to end up keeping the Lenormand deck separate so that I can, yeah, that just, no matter which way you go, that just shuffles beautifully. I have a feeling I'm going to be keeping the Lenormand deck separate because I am working on building like a huge collection of Claire Goodchild oracles. So here we have the grave, the woman, and the raven. So here we have the gray, which I believe is the house in Lenormand. We have the woman and the raven, which I believe is the stork, right? So there's really this idea of cultivating things at home. I love that. I love that idea. Lots of things that you can do with this. Lots of options because you can use it as a Lenormand. Then we have the Oracle deck that we could, use as an Oracle, which has some of the most unique Oracle cards that I think I've seen in a deck. If you're into that kind of darker side of life, I guess you would call it, like this is an awesome Oracle for that, because not only because of the artwork, but because of the contents and the context of the cards, I think is really cool. There are definite cards in here that I have never seen in another Oracle deck, and I think that's going to be really interesting. The other thing that I did want to mention about these cards is that I think that you could use these cards, the way that the images and the themes that she's included could almost work as a sort of a Lenormand in itself, right? I've mentioned before that I have other decks that aren't necessarily a Lenormand, but the artwork or the really it's kind of the items on the card really lend itself well to Lenormand readings, and so I use it that way. Just because we're here and it's right here, I'll show you. This is my Literary Witches, and I've trimmed all of the Witches material cards down to be little square cards, and I read them like a Lenormand. So each one has a very distinct message, and it doesn't really change based on the context of the reading, right? It just is what it is. And I read it very much in a linear fashion, like a sentence. And so I think that you could totally use these cards in the same way, because while there are some, I think, cards in here that could be, like there's a book, right? There's a book in a Lenormand as well. Well, I don't mean that I necessarily read it as if it were a Lenormand, like literally putting Lenormand meanings over the top of it. I read it, the style in which I read it is like a Lenormand. And I think you could do the same with this as well. And I mean, these kind of actually all look pretty cool together. I mean, how cool would it be to pull out, because we're here, one of these Literary Witches here. Of course, I've heavily modified my copy, and then do readings around it using a couple of these different decks. I think that would be really awesome too. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that because I think that you could totally use this deck this way as well. You could put it all together and use it as an oracle. I really think that this is a really interesting and unique deck because it does have so many different ways that you could use it. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to use it, and I think that I will probably play with some different structures. Definitely, going to keep out the Lenormand for a while and play with that and use that for a while. Maybe use these as an oracle on their own. Maybe I will mix them with the Oracle of Oddities, which I do happen to have my second one, Oracle of Oddities 2, right here. So let's see. They are exactly the same size. So, I mean, despite the fact that they have different backs, but I could totally just add this to my Oracle of Oddities collection and just make like the most gigantic, most awesome oracle, which I'm kind of tempted to do. So that might be something that happens, but I love that there's just a lot of variety here. And that really thrills me when I can do multiple things with a deck, when I have a lot of options, a lot of variety. I think that is really cool. So I hope you enjoyed this look at the Memento Mori Lenormand and Oracle deck by Claire Goodchild. Also, don't forget to check out the podcast on Claire's website at Black and the Moon. Thank you for joining me today. You will find links for the decks featured here in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.